I'm with Tal Hartuv, the author of The Rage Less Traveled. And we just had the release of the hostages. How is Israel feeling at the moment with the release of all these hostages?
Good morning, Paul. Thank you for having me on your show. Really, you're doing wonderful work. Look, for me personally, I can only talk about it from a personal point of view. When the hostages came out a few days ago, I was so emotional. I was in tears, to see the joy and the relief, but also the pain these people have been through, the torture and the starvation and the beatings and keeping people in cages underground. Like they have a long, long road ahead. So who wasn't relieved? Every single person in Israel was relieved. But for me, of course, it has the other side of the coin, so to speak, because in this deal, one of the terrorists who attacked me with a machete multiple times and murdered my Christian American friend in front of my eyes, he was released in the deal. So going back to your question about how this feels, look, there's a verse in the Hebrew Bible in the Old Testament from the book of Ecclesiastes, which it says, there's a whole lot of verses about it, but there's a time to be born and a time to die. There's a time for love and a time to hate. There's a time for joy and a time to weep. And I think that it's not an either or. What is this time? If I think about a time for joy and a time to weep, this is that time. It's not one emotion over the other. Obviously, I'm furious at the injustice of it all. And the fact that a murder of an American Christian, because they thought she was Jewish. So there is this injustice, which is very important to anybody. Justice is very important to somebody who's been victimized. And then there's this absolute relief. So it's a bit like having some kind of emotional schizophrenia, I would say.
Yeah, it must be really hard because you're happy that the hostages are free, and everybody's been waiting and waiting for 2 years to see these hostages free. But Israel and yourself are paying a heavy price because you're releasing so many people with blood on their hands.
Yeah, and that's terrible, and that never works out. I think we have to be really honest because these terrorists who have been freed have vowed that they will murder again. They want to murder every Jew in the earth. They vowed their murder again. So the irony is that some of the people, including myself, who are very much in a celebratory mood, some of these people will be at their funerals a few weeks or months down the road. And, giving in and appeasing to evil, it might have brought us a very brittle ceasefire, but it's certainly a long, long way from peace.
So the killer who attacked you, what was his sentence and how long did he serve?
Okay, so first of all, he's a murderer because, in the Bible, there's nowhere it says, thou shalt not kill. It says, thou shalt not murder. In fact, it says, rise and kill first. So these two words, kill and murder, have a very different moral weight. So he's a murderer and he was sentenced. In Israel, if you get life imprisonment, it's 35 years. So he got life for the murder of my friend and he got 20 years for my attempted murder. So he was in for 55 years and he served 15 years of that sentence.
Wow. This really puts Israel in danger, doesn't he? Has he actually shown any sense of remorse at all?
Wow, Paul, it's interesting you find that, because I was like, how do you say, pacing around the house thinking, my goodness, what am I going to do with myself here? The emotion. And I've got Arab friends. You know me as a person who has, although I hate the people for what they did to me, I've managed to maintain friendships with Arabs and Palestinians. So I asked one of my Arab friends, I said, hey, listen, I want you to try and find something on his social media. And he found me the Facebook of the brother of the murderer, right? So I looked at this little film, 10-second clip of the murderer coming out. And he's got Free Palestine, the kafia, all this Palestinian symbolism. And he's just grinning from ear to ear. So that's one of the things I wish I hadn't chosen to see that because it didn't help. But there was almost like a insatiable curiosity and voyeurism, wanting to know what he looks like. Did he suffer? What's his mood now? So I just really wish that I hadn't done that. And I don't know where he was released to. I've told it was initially in Egypt, and then I don't know where they're going to go from there.
So are they actually out of the country now? So you're not
Well, it
going to
was
like
out,
meet him on the
yeah,
street?
yeah. Oh, well, not as much as I know. I mean, the process was that they will immediately get deported to Egypt, and then from there, different countries have vowed to take them. I think Britain included, right? Didn't they want some Palestinian refugees, whatever that means? I don't know what the agreement is with Europe, but like I'd heard that some will go back to Gaza. Some will be released into Judea and Samaria, which seems to me nuts, or the West Bank, whatever you want to call it. And some will be taken to Turkey, who is a Muslim Brotherhood terror supporting state. And some will go to Qatar, which is also a Muslim Brotherhood terror supporting state. So I don't know exactly where this one will go. But worth pointing out, I think, is over the last 15 years, this murderer has been, or his family rather, have been getting millions of shekels from European and, well, under Biden, taxpayers' money. It's like a little monthly murder stipend. And, you know, the interesting thing is, I've visited Bethlehem, I visit my friends there, wonderful people who I won't say their name. And when I tell them, good Christian people, and I say, you know, the Palestinian Authority is paying monthly salaries to people who murdered Jews, and the more Jews they murder, the more wealthy they get. And I find it's a very hard thing for Palestinians to actually believe. And I brought the papers, the documents, the court, the prison statement that showed them. And they believed me then, but I think it's very, very hard for a lot of Palestinians to actually believe, especially the Christian Palestinian population, very hard for them to believe that that is what their leadership would do.
Do you have a fear that, like, particularly if they go to Europe, that they will set up terror cells within Europe?
Well, I think that already there are terror cells in Europe, right? I mean, we saw a Islamic terror attack in Manchester a couple of weeks ago. Every other day, there's recording of rapes of non-Muslim women. There have been several hundred terror attacks in Europe. Some of them have been thwarted. So it wouldn't be like if they went there that they'd have, let's just set up a terror cell, because it already exists. Now, they might, if they go to Europe, of course, they'd find certainly something to join and exacerbate the violence there, the terrorist Islamic violence that's already going on.
Did Israel pay too heavy a price, or did they have to make a deal with the devil?
It's like I said from the beginning, right, Paul? It's like I think we paid a much too heavy a price. But the price, you know, what were we paying it for? What was our reward? I mean, it's one of those most unanswerable questions. There was like a Holocaust scholar who described the situation of the Jewish people, the Jewish leadership under the Nazis in the ghettos, right? Where the Jewish leadership have to answer to the Nazis. They have to obey the Nazi command, but the Jewish leadership also have to take care of their people who are in a terrible situation. So this Holocaust historian describes that situation as choiceless choices. Whichever way you turn, it's going to be a bad deal. And I think that's what's happened here. I've got to say that I think that the ultimate release of so many murderers, I do think that the likes of the British, you know, I still have British citizenship. I've been in Israel since high school. But I think the likes of the British government, they had their part in that because they unilaterally announced recognition of the state of Palestine. I mean, nothing was decided about borders, nothing, and the Hamas actually thanked them. So I think that this sloppy and really rather abhorrent step by the British government, which isn't actually fair on the Palestinians who are living under kind of a tyranny, let alone fair to Israel. But I think this statement by the British government was one of the factors that corroded the alliance in the West, the moral alliance for Israel. They abdicated from their morality. And in the end, Hamas saw the British government as siding with them. And President Trump comes along and it's like, you know, let's just get this done. So I wouldn't just think it was just a bad deal for Israel. I'd see how Israel got into this position in the first place.
Now, we've seen in the past other terrorists have been released in peace deals. Have they returned back to terror? And does this put Israel in quite an immediate danger?
Well, first of all, we know that Sinwar, the architect of the new final solution, as we say, he was of the October the 7th massacre. He was released in the Shalit deal in 2011. So we know historically that it never works to appease terrorism. So I think it, of course, puts Israelis in immediate danger. It puts Jewish people in danger. It puts the state of Israel in danger. It puts Europe in danger. It puts Christian civilization in danger. I think that's not a fact that one can even contest.
Mm-hmm. Does it feel like for you a betrayal of justice?
Oh, absolutely, it does. And like I said, on the other hand, I'm so glad our hostages are home. I mean, if you went to me before the hostages are out and you said, Tal, listen, can you let your would-be murderer out if he promises never to murder again? Could you do that for the hostages? You know what I'd do? I'd say, let him out. I'd drive to the prison and I'd take him home myself. I'd give him a sandwich on the way, just get our people home. But that's not the reality because they will murder again. And personally, yes, I feel very, like I said, I think I said in the beginning of this interview, you know, like God, if we talk in the terms of the Bible, like God doesn't want us to take vengeance, right? It says, vengeance is mine, but we are to pursue justice. And when you have justice and the wrong person is in prison, I mean, the one who did wrong is in prison, that justice puts a cap on my instinct to go and take vengeance. So justice is an incredibly important part for a functioning society.
Mm. Do you worry for the Jews in Great Britain at the moment? We've had the terror attack in Manchester. We've had Keir Starmer declaring a Palestinian state. We've had someone who's been wearing a Star of David being arrested. Maccabi Tel Aviv fans can't go and watch the football game. And then we've had Bob Villan shouting death to the IDF at Greenbelt. Do you worry for Britain and do you worry for the Jews that are in Britain?
I absolutely do. I absolutely do. I think, you know, if you've given the last, what is it, couple of decades, the only institutions and religious buildings and schools that have had to ensure their own private security, like a community security. The only time you'll see security is at Jewish buildings. And that's already a red light. And then, as you quite rightly depicted, these murderous attacks on the Jewish community, the government ignoring this. I mean, I saw the other day the Home Secretary, what's her name, Mahmoud?
Shana Mahmoud.
Yeah, and Starmer. They like, you know, we've just had 2 Jews murdered on British streets, and they're messing around with Islamists, with Muslims, saying we're going to protect you at all costs, and here's £10 million. But show me the threat on Muslim people. Who's ever gone and like, do you know what I mean? It's like there was an attack, a horrible terror attack, when somebody drove into a mosque years ago. I was actually in London at the time, and that you don't have that anymore. I mean, people are not going burning mosques or shooting at Muslims, but the refusal of the British government to even mention this kind of an attack as an Islamic terror attack, it's going to backfire. It's going to backfire because in the end, the British population are going to feel unsafe. The Jews certainly feel unsafe. And in the end, because it's not defined who are the terrorists here, people are going to start taking the law into their own hands, and that's never a good thing. So it's very interesting following the debate in Britain, like what happens, you know, Tommy Robinson, who's you just say his name and everybody has an immediate opinion without even met him. I was his guide in 2016. I mean, I'd actually not really heard of Tommy. The name rang a bell, but I've been in Israel too long. And then this is only 6 years after I'd been attacked and I wasn't back to tour guiding. So I just Googled him and I found, you know, what I read is he's this horrible neo-Nazi, right-wing, racist, goose-stepping thug. And I told the man who asked me to guide Tommy, I said, listen, I really don't want to give a platform to people like this. But this guy, Brian, he told me, he said, listen, read the book, read Tommy's book, just postpone your decision and read the book. So I read the book, Enemy of the State. And I'm a writer myself. And I think one of the things that is impressive about a book is when you can actually hear the author's voice. It's like he's sitting right next to you and chit-chatting in your ear, right? And just from a literary point of view, Tommy's book was fabulous. But what I read in the book, which were Tommy's words, were nothing like what I was finding on the general mainstream media or on Google. So I found that fascinating, and I bit the bait. And I said, yeah, I'll take Tommy around. I want to get to the bottom of this. And he comes over with a black friend of his. We drive around Israel for 8 days, and I've got a Muslim friend of mine in the car. I took him actually to I can't say the name, but a Palestinian so-called refugee camp. He spent the afternoon there. He really wanted to meet everybody. And then one day we're up at the Golan Heights. Now this is way before October the 7th, and there's a tour guide. You could ask I always ask the soldiers. We went to an army base, just passed by. Always ask the soldiers, do you mind if my tourist stands on a tank? And perfectly okay. And Tommy wanted a picture of himself on a tank. And he's in his boxer shorts, flip-flops, stands on a tank. A soldier gives him a gun without the magazine in it. And Tommy holds this like he's holding something stinky. He doesn't want it too near him. And we're laughing. And Tommy puts this on his social media. It was just a silly moment. The soldiers were saying, oh, you're so feminine. And when Tommy puts this on the media, the next day, one of the main British papers, it was headline story, far-right activist standing on tank in war-torn region. I mean, Israel wasn't even in war. And when I saw that, I thought, that was a defining moment for me. That what Tommy said is he is persecuted by the state. And why do I say that? Because he's been speaking up for the Jewish community. He's been speaking up for Israel. He's on a trip into Israel now. And I understand the Jews because Tommy is a big voice, right? But the Jewish community in Britain, they seem to think if you take Tommy Robinson out of the equation, then the Islamists or the jihadists who have now got really political places in the British government, the Jewish community seem to think if Tommy would just shut his mouth, it's all going to go away. But it's not going to go away. And in that sense, Tommy Robinson is irrelevant to the discourse in Britain. Jews, with every day that pass, are feeling less safe and less safe.
Do you think it's time for the Jews to come home?
Look, I'm not one to decide what people want to do. But as somebody who works in Holocaust education, the situation of the Jews in Germany when Hitler came to power was the same predicament, right? There's like an increase of propaganda and hate speech, and it escalated very quickly in Germany. But I think, why would I say that? I'm comparing the situation, like most German Jews in 1933, you wouldn't know they were religious. They were very much assimilated. They saw themselves as first and foremost Germans and only then Jews. And you don't know what's going to happen in the future, right? It's like, got to sell up the house. And what about the grandkids? And I'm already 50 years old. What kind of work am I going to get in their case in England or something like that? And the last thing in us as human beings, the last thing to die is always hope. We say, oh, this isn't the Germany I know, or in the case of England, oh, this isn't the Britain I know. This is going to get better. And I don't see any guarantee, especially under this present government and with unlimited migration and unchecked propaganda and incitement coming from the Muslim community. I just can't see that it is going to get better. And if it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse. And if it's going to get worse, then absolutely, I think that Jewish people should start planning to pack up and come back to Israel.
Now, you've written the book, The Rage Less Traveled. Tell us about that.
I wrote that. I started writing in trauma therapy. It was very, trauma therapy, it makes me traumatized thinking back to it. But basically, I'd given a statement to the police that night when I was busy dying in the hospital. And it was like an A4 piece of paper. And I'd never lost consciousness, right? Never. And later that statement was, it was, how do you say, paralleled with the confession of the terrorists, forensic evidence. And the statement was absolutely true. There were no, I wasn't then writing a memoir, right? It was a statement. So in trauma therapy, I handed it to the therapist, and it was grueling, Paul, what I had to do. It lasted a few months. If I had originally written, let's say in the statement, the police statement, it was more like they did this, we did that, then they did this, we did that. So I had to, week by week, break down every sentence, and I'd start with the 5 senses. I'd have to go through that 1-page testimony, and it would be, well, I could say I saw him, but I have to say, well, what was he wearing? What were the colors? What were the tones? How can I describe movement? What was I seeing? So I had to take the sense of sight and go through every time I saw something and think about describing it. And it's the same thing with the hearing. I mean, sorry to be so blunt, but did Christine, my friend, did she cry? Did she squeal? Did she scream? And the murderers, did they grunt? Did they yell? Did they shout? So I did this with all the 5 senses, and it came out incredibly visceral. And I turned it into a tiny little booklet just to sell basically to friends so I could make some income. And then I realized people always used to say, oh, you write so, it's so amazing. I felt like I was there. You should write the rest of the story. Like, what happened after you got to hospital? What was it like to be in court? What does post-traumatic stress disorder look like? So I spent 7 years writing basically 275 pages. And I rewrote, and it's a memoir. It's not the story of my life. It starts in the forest, and I won't tell you how it ends, like the book itself. So that was very grueling. And then I was also speaking as much as I probably could. I was still very much in recovery. I was injured very badly. I was speaking all around the world. And then I think, when was it? In 2020, I'd had enough. I realized I've done what I can. I was trying to stop the funding to the Palestinian Authority. I spoke about terrorism. I set up little projects, as you know, within the areas of the Palestinian Authority to educate children so they won't be groomed to go and murder Jews. And then I'd had enough, and I thought, I'm going to go anonymous. I was a very well-known figure abroad and in Israel. And literally on the 10th anniversary, I changed my name to Tal Hartuv. And I went undercover for 3 years. And then when October the 7th broke out, I know I'm pretty good at public speaking and I've got a voice. I thought, okay, I'm back in the game. So I started doing speaking again. And it's quite interesting because, it's like, I remember that I chose the name Tal because in Hebrew it means dew, the morning dew. And a dew is something unseen, it's small, it's nourishing, and certainly in this part of the world, without it we wouldn't, we really wouldn't survive. And to me it's always been those little unseen, nourishing things in life that helps me get through day to day. So what can I tell you? That's the story.
You've been through a lot of trauma. What is your prayer today for the hostages that have been through such a terrible, terrible ordeal?
Yes, it's, when you see the smiling hostages, I see beyond that. I think other people do too. They've got a long road ahead. They've got a very, very long road ahead, and so have their families. They won't be the same. They'll be the same but different. There's so many cliches, right? Like time heals. Well, no, it doesn't. But the further you get away from the event, the more things come into your view screen. But they've been through an absolute indescribable hell on earth. So my prayer is that I don't think you do heal from this. I think you just repack yourself up and you learn about yourself, your strengths and your weaknesses, and you see life differently. But I don't think they'd want to heal in the sense that it would feel like that was just like they had a little cold for 2 years, like healing implies that we should just all kiss and make up and forget everything. But my prayer is that they'd be continued to be surrounded by loving family, friends. Of course, Israel is a community and a nation. I don't think there's any place like it on earth. It's like, for me, it's the best place to be stabbed, but it was the best place to also begin to progress. So my prayer is that they would have that love and support, and that they too would one day, I think like myself, to be honest, like the terror attack that happened to me, it's not who I am, right? It's what happened to me. It's a very, very big thing, very formative, but it's not who I am. Okay. And I would my prayer for them is that as the years go by, they'd also come to a place where they'd also be able to say, look, this is what happened to us, but this isn't who we are. We are so much more. And I think that they can do that. I think given the strength and the community that the people of Israel are, they can certainly do that. And that's my prayer.
Where can people get a hold of your book, The Rage Less Traveled?
Unfortunately, only on Amazon. I don't even think I have a copy anymore. But there's also, I am on social media, and I am trying to think about writing another book, because I want to explore really big moral subjects about justice and vengeance and whether to forgive or not to forgive. This is, I think, a public conversation that we all need to have, whether myself as a Jew or your listeners as Christians. You do get the book on Amazon, and hopefully within a few months there'll be something else on the shelf.
Well, Tal, thank you very much for sharing today.
Thank you, Paul. It's been a privilege. Thank you very much.